All right, good evening. It's 6 o'clock. Special City Council Workshop, Monday, January 9th. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public were duly notified in the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Just a few comments about these sessions before we get started, and then we'll move to citizens' comments. As most of you are aware, as council, we've not discussed in any detail the Planning Commission's recommendations or reviewed other data from our listening sessions, other surveys, or the hundreds of emails we've received on this topic. That's why we've set up these series of meetings to singularly focus on this topic and ensure we cover all the issues thoroughly. The only vote council has taken was in early December about implementing a short-term moratorium on issuing new short-term rental license while council discussed and studied the information it has received and made a determination of the recommendation from the Planning Commission. This is an important topic for our community and our residents. It's one that needs to be approached thoughtfully and with open, productive discussions. My hope is our council members will approach these series of meetings for what they're meant to accomplish: open, constructive discussions and dialogue aimed at vetting all areas relating to short-term rentals and how they should be managed in our community. This is not a new issue to tackle. Short-term rentals have been here since the start of IOP, but we need to move with purpose and bring clarity and remove any uncertainty for our residents. Any decisions we make won't be set in stone and can be adjusted as markets change or new information becomes available. Just like adjustments focused on livability have been tweaked over the years, like limiting house size or lot coverage or occupancy limits. We aren't going to agree on every aspect, but we hope we'll come to the table ready to roll up our sleeves, be open-minded, and ensure we look at all solutions and ways to reach common goals. We need to together determine common measurements and definitions we will consistently use when discussing and measuring the license penetration across our island. You'll see as we move through some of the data, there are multiple data points on particular topics. We need to define for those that have multiple data points what is our common language and common success measures. There are many issues and areas associated with this particular discussion. We'll keep these workshops singularly focused and try to keep them to 1.5 hours. Some topics could be assigned out to a committee for further consideration. And tonight, you may or may not know, we're going to have a hard stop at 7:10. There's something happening 7:30-ish on TV, roughly. Championship game, so we're going to Jeopardy.
Yeah, that's right.
Jeopardy.
I was wondering if you had forgotten about it.
Oh, no, bad planning on my part. I'm a huge college football fan, as I know a lot of people are. So we will stop wherever we are about 7:10 and push everything to our next meeting that we already have scheduled for the 23rd. So with that, let's move to citizens' comments. We only have a few folks that signed up. I know our agenda went out a little bit late last week, so we'll use the full 30-minute slot. If folks wanted to sign up and didn't have the opportunity to do that, we'll do that, let you have that opportunity. But just as a reminder for our residents, we've got multiple opportunities this month. Tomorrow night, we have a workshop. Our next short-term rental workshop's the 23rd. Our regular council meeting is on the 24th, so don't think tonight's your last chance to have an opportunity to speak to us. So, Nicole?
Mr. Vega, Andrew Vega.
Hey, good evening. I'm Andrew Vega. I live at 104 Sparrow Drive. I'm here to state that I'm against the limit on short-term rentals. According to the agenda provided for tonight, only 27% of single-family residences are short-term rentals. Don't use fear to drive a solution that you want in a desired state. Just stick to the truth. Stick to what's reality on the island. Adjust current policies to be better defined and enforceable as livability issues. We talked about this in all the listening sessions and in previous comments. Let's talk about leadership versus management. Management discounts the people and looks at life through a set of metrics. Don't just look at the metrics. Leaders evaluate the numbers and the impact of that policy. Does a policy change fall in line with what the community wants, not your individual strategic end state for the island? Think about that. Again, I just want to be short and sweet. I'm against the cap for short-term rentals. Please take time to consider all the facts and look at these issues strongly. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Campson.
Elizabeth, 32 Intercoastal Court. 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 When I reviewed the underlying data that led to the summary published with the agenda, I was disappointed to see that what is being presented is incomplete and flawed. There are an additional 37 pending licenses, many with active listings, and another 48 illegal rentals that should be forced to obtain one, bringing the total number to 1786. With 4 months left in the license year, more licenses may be issued as properties continue to change hands and use, and as surrounding communities enforce caps and enact moratoriums. Our STR percentage is 39. In 2021, we issued 1,403 short-term rental licenses. In 2022, we issued, or should have issued, 1,749, with another 37 waiting to be picked up. That's an overall increase of 27% since you've been kicking this can down the road. Where will we be at the end of the license year? Where will we be in 3 years if municipalities around us are limiting numbers and we are not? I have yet to find a consistent number of dwelling units reported for the island. Last week, the accomplishments report said we had 4,485. Tonight, it's 4,569. The planning review number was 4,650, and the 2021 Ways and Means number was 4,419. Obviously, this matters as it is a common denominator for calculations. How is the 4 to 6% distribution box helpful if it isn't going to show the percentage of short-term rentals, and why does it stop in 2010? Why not go back to 2000 when 50% of the island was occupied by full-time residents and 50% was seasonal? It also ignores the 82 long-term licenses issued this year. Properties with long-term licenses are investment properties. Depending on lease terms, a 4% exemption may be granted, but that doesn't turn the unit into an owner-occupied dwelling unit. Part-time residents living elsewhere often claim 4% here for the tax break. I found multiple short-term license holders with active listings living elsewhere that have wrongly received a 4% exemption here. Defaulting to tax classifications for a discussion centered around dwelling unit numbers while ignoring segments with either a long or short. Our practice of registering short-term rentals is inadequate at best. I use the word registering because that is the extent of what we do. They are business licenses to add to our accounting program and not a $200 million a year industry to be monitored, managed, and moderated. We need a new department in zoning and new personnel and new software designed specifically for short-term rental management, which should be easily funded with a few of those golden eggs we are said to have laying around. Finally, a priority of our strategic plan is to build trust. When I see a presentation like this, or the June council meeting document that showed a trend line but none of the footnotes, or the March 2021 revenue discussion that was corrupted from the start because all of the revenue from the various hotels was included in the short-term rental column, I'll just say this: you're not doing a very good job in that regard. The public relies on published documents to understand issues. If they are flawed, we cannot have a serious fact-based discussion. Thank you.
Mark Mitchell.
Hi, I'm Mark Mitchell, 126 Carolina Boulevard. And my wife saw the video the last time I spoke and told me I need to organize myself better, so I've got my stuff here. I'm here to speak for us IOP residents who are feeling potentially damaged by the threat to a limited availability of rental licenses, and to ask consideration for the hundreds of neighbors whose properties will be affected by the significant loss of their property rights but have no say in the matter. Simply put, the issue surrounding short-term rentals is a calculated effort by a group of property owners who wish to install HOA features into the community that prides itself on just the opposite. The proponents for a cap on vacation licenses are threatening to change the look and feel of this island forever. They already for the most part, they already have done so by injecting the divisive rhetoric into a community that desperately needs uniting. We already have city employees counting people in bedrooms and cars in driveways. We hear from proponents of a cap that they wish to know who their neighbors are. Hey, I understand that. I appreciate that, and that's a great wish. And again, I've tried to do as much research on both sides of the issue. It would be nice, but does that desire to know their neighbors effectively allow us, does that equate to being able to take away somebody else's property rights? It would be nice, but it doesn't allow us to take away somebody's rights. Will our next ordinance be to allow only folks from Ohio to buy homes on Cameron Boulevard, those from New Jersey on Waterway, and the folks from Georgia can only own homes from 21st Avenue to 26th Avenue? That sounds far-fetched. Well, so did limiting our property rights last year. My wife Lisa and I raised 4 kids on the island. We lived among full-time residents, and next to vacation rentals, and still do. We have wonderful friends on this island, and I don't believe any of them ever lived next door to me. We met through church, school, the grocery store, marina, regular use of the rec center that we have here that's wonderful, and of course the beach. We also stay in touch with vacationers who we've met over the years. As many of you know, I'm a real estate agent, and many of you will dismiss my comments as business related. It's an economic fact that the market will take care of an oversupply of short-term rentals, as the owners at some point will not be able to drive enough revenue and will sell them and equal things out again. When there are too many, they will simply sell due to lack of revenue. I can also tell you for many various reasons, people place their homes in an LLC or a trust, and a good many of them never intended to get a rental license until June of this year and after to protect their rights. It's common knowledge that short-term license requests increased dramatically starting this June when the STR proposal came out. In last month's council meeting, some implored members to vote for a moratorium because of the dramatic increase in licenses this year that they caused by proposing the STR limit. In short, the statistics presented in June clearly showed no need of a rental cap. I will say that the best thing that the council has done this year so far is implementing the listening sessions.
Mr. Mitchell, I need you to wrap your
Okay,
comments.
what a
Thank you.
great opportunity. And I would hope that we could keep those going and maybe have a different topic every month. That was a lot of fun. But I wanted to thank you all for your service to our island. I know you are generally interested in finding solutions. And oh yeah, go Dogs.
Cal McCombs.
I'm Cal McCombs. I live back on 417th. Do have a couple of rental properties on the island. Been around for about 30, 40 years. Have sold, bought, according to circumstances that I had. First thing I want to say is this is not a 55 and over community. This is a vibrant community with people who love to live on the island because of what the island's all about. We got big houses with 7 bedrooms here. Right beside it, we got a little ranch. Right beside it, we got a J.C. Long. Great. It's super. Why in the world would we ever want to change that? Over the last 30 years, we see that our proportions have not changed to any degree to really make it a big deal. I said this before. Let's take a step back, look and see what happens in the next 30 years, and if it's something that we got a problem with, let's talk about it. The other thing that I will say is that the economy of this island is rental. You can like it or not like it, but the money that comes into our tax deal is rentals. I mean, what other industry do we have? Nothing. But it's a very vibrant industry that drives Isle of Palms of being a very great community where taxes are reasonable. The last thing I want to say is that last time I was here, I asked the committee, not the committee, y'all the council, and y'all are our leaders, and I appreciate what y'all do. But I asked you, raise your hand if you've ever had any dealings in short-term rentals. I did not get a single person that raised their hand on council. Statistics is what I hear coming out of the council. Statistics. Statistics lie. You can make statistics to come out to be anything you want it to be. So I'm not interested in statistics, to be honest with you. But I am saying this too. If we do decide to at least get a vote on this thing, I would suggest that the people who have never had any dealings with short-term rentals are not the 7 or 8 people that make that decision for the rest of our island. If we're going to vote on it, let's send ballots to every property owner, whether they live here or not, and get their voice too. So rather than you guys deciding And I'll address every envelope if you want me to. But let's go out and see what people that own this property, not just live here, but own the property, give them a little bit of rights too. I mean, they own part of this island. So if
Mr.
we're gonna
McCombs.
have a vote, let's let the citizens and the property owners of this island make the decision, and not just five or, well, how many are you? Eight, 7, 6, 5, 4, whatever.
9.
Decide what we're gonna do on.
Statistics
the
do matter.
Statistics, that I can prove anything. I was
Cal-
a football coach
Cal,
one time.
we need to wrap up.
Okay, I was a football coach one time, and I tell you what, I said we're number one in the nation in defense. I wasn't, but I can make statistics tell you I was. So I'm not into that statistic stuff. I'm into the voters and the property owners that own property on this island having a chance to make that decision. Thank you.
Terry McGowan.
Good evening, everyone, Mayor, council members. My name is Terry McGowan. I live at 3 Drifter Lane with my wife Ellen. And we've lived here for about 6 years now and love the island. We talk about livability, just a short anecdotal story. Ellen and I believe that, quality of living comes from interactions with all types of people. I get enrichment from interacting with people who are here for a week. I see them on the beach. They give us compliments about our beach and about our community. So we've got to look at that in its context and say, well, what do we have to endure to continue to enrich everyone who wants to come to this island? So with that, I just want to articulate a couple questions my wife and I still have concerning this whole issue. We've participated in the workshops. The general consensus in the workshop we participated in was that the majority there really wanted more enforcement of the current rules, and also, if there is a clear and present issue, let's start to address it. But remember, we're a small town. Things that happen don't happen overnight and cause deleterious effects on our city. It's not going to happen that way. If we start to see a deleterious effect from short-term rentals and the people who are renting from our community, then we can act. But just kind of talking about these things as if they already exist, I don't think is a fair way to proceed under as government. So that's one question we have. The other question is, well, the community lessons was the second one, but we need to focus on clear and present issues, something that may or may not happen, but we do believe it has to be a clear and present issue that we're going to address here and that we expect you guys to exercise your leadership on. And then I want to reiterate what was just said also. We believe that an issue like this that has such a great impact on everyone who owns property on this island should be left as a referendum to the voters. If you want to do something productive about this issue and you want to truly get a poll of what the temperament is of people about short-term rentals, let's do a referendum. Something that is not biased, it's actually a vote from the property owners. So we're definitely supportive of that. Again, my wife wants to reiterate that any issues need to be fact-based, and discussions of the size of properties, about how these properties are owned by LLCs or they're going to be huge McMansions. Ellen and I believe that's more of a zoning issue for building and code, not short-term rentals. Now, maybe they're the same under the rules and laws, but we believe that if you stay focused on the real issues, we're going to have an effective leadership in your council and your leadership, Mayor. So we'd appreciate it if you could just hear the people and understand what they're trying to say, and we'll move on.
That's all I have on the list.
All right, that's been, 15 minutes, give or
Yes.
take? I'll open the floor. We don't typically do this, but again, I know our materials got outlined. If there's someone else that would like to speak tonight, we'll keep it to an overall 30-minute limit, but we're about 15 minutes in, give or take. If somebody else would like to, Mr. Santiago, I see movement.
I'm Tony Santiago. I live at 60 Ocean Point. I also think statistics can be manipulated, but if my team got beat 0-8 in my senior year in high school when I played football, every team in the conference could say they were better than me, okay? And the facts were there. So we do have some distortions. We have rumors going around that you can have your property value decreased by limiting STRs. That flies in the face of basic economics. It's a supply and demand issue. You cannot decrease it if you increase the supply.
Mr. Santiago, you want to
Decrease.
pull that microphone down so we can pick it up? Thank you.
That better? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I want to make sure, I know there's been a push on the Wild Dunes Community Property Group to push that statement out in Wild Dunes, that your property values will go down if you cap STRs. If that's the case, why is Sullivan's Island's property value so much higher than ours? Flies in the face of facts. Why is Debadu's property values higher? Pawleys Island's island values are higher than Myrtle Beach. Okay, there's a basic economic issue here we have to factor in. I also want to support the idea that a referendum of voters is the way to go. I hope we don't have to get there, like Folly Beach is doing right now, but it is a right of us to do that if we don't get the answer we hope is the right answer. At some point, if STRs increase, whether the stat is what you indicated on your printout or the 39% that was brought up a while ago, we have to figure that out. In the last episode, I talked about bad data, and I think that led to the issues with the resort and the whole issues we had there. We didn't have good data. We need traffic studies. We need to be able to track illegal STRs. It's not hard. You can scan the internet, write an algorithm and catch everybody on our VRBO and every address out there and cross-reference them. So we do need to put more data into this. We need an answer. I don't know the right answer. I don't know what to cap, but I do know that if we're the only property in the area on the coast and the East Coast that's not having short-term rentals, we got a problem. If we're not capping them and everybody else is, we've got a big problem. And everyone on council is going to have to deal with it one way or the other. But if the residents who vote do not get a suitable answer, we will have to go to a referendum. That's the only solution we will have. And then the residents will make the decision, not the property owners. Those are two different groups. Also on your graph there, I would suggest you change that investment group that says investment and put part-time resident, please. It's slanted, okay, not intentionally, I'm sure it was just a misoverlook, but let's represent who's what. Residents, full-time. I do not have a vote on my second home in downtown Charleston. I don't get to vote there. I have a short-term rental cap there,
Mr. Santiago, I need you to.
and I
wrap up.
honor it. And I think that's nothing that's new. What we're doing is not different, okay, guys? Every county has it. If we need it, we should implement it. Good luck, guys. You got a good one here.
Speak. Going. Again, there'll be other opportunities to address council in either regular workshops, normal meetings, or our 23rd edition. So let's just kind of jump in, if we will. I know, as you're in the audience and you're watching the sausage being made on live TV here, it's going to be tempting to hoop and holler and comment on maybe where council may be directed or may be having conversations. Again, this is a work session that we're expressing opinions and trying to get to an answer. I want to walk through a couple of topics real quick, and then I'm going to turn it over to Desiree and Douglas to start walking through some of the data and information that we have with regard to what you have in front of you. If you picked up a slide from the back tonight, and again, one of the pieces is this whole data conversation is we absolutely need to agree on what our denominator is, what our numerator is, and how we're going to define success as we walk forward. So, I think before we go very far, we need to figure out what it is we're trying to solve, achieve, or address with any action that may come. So I wouldn't mind just having some open conversation amongst council right now before we go much further. And we may get stuck here tonight, and that's okay. We've got other meetings that we'll have to get through the rest of it. But I've just put some starting points on the page, if you will: livability, limiting future rental units, enforcement, residential quality of life, lack of community feel, some of the things we heard from the listening sessions or in the strategic plan survey that we'll look at again in a minute. So again, we just open it up to council to let you opine on what we think we are trying to solve through any action or any ordinance changes or caps or whatever. Rusty?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, what jumps off the page for me is the 3 listening sessions we had some months ago, and I attended all those sessions. I've said that before. And what I heard loud and clear coming out of those sessions was more enforceability of what we already have in place. No caps is what I heard. And basically, what I heard from all of that group, to the great majority, is we want to maintain the residential quality of life we have now. And if there's a threat going forward in the future, we want you as a council to be able to recognize that threat and be able to put things in place that would help mitigate any adverse situations that may come up. I'm not going to go too far out there because we've got a lot of discussion to go, but I basically personally been on record for the last couple of years, ever since I first heard the term STR and the effects on the island, and it becoming a discussion in our planning commission. I've said to myself, you're just going to have to prove to me we got a problem here. And right now, I don't see it. Now, I know we're going to go through a lot of data. We're going to look at this, we're going to look at that, and I may be convinced otherwise. I may be convinced at some point that we need to have some sort of oversight committee. I could see that we have mechanisms in place that trigger an issue if we see it coming up. Almost to Coach McComb's comment, of course, he had a 30-year window on his. I won't go that far, but I think we could put some mechanisms in place that would alert us as to when there appears to be a potential issue coming up. If it does at all. I think right now with the economy, with the interest rates rising, I think with the way historically what we've seen with a third, and a third in terms of the way the households are occupied, either partially, second homes or otherwise, or rentals, that seems to be holding pretty well true, and there's been some spikes, and there's really, I know it personally because I know people who did this. There are people who went out and got short-term rental licenses last summer for fear that they were somehow going to lose their home in the future or not have the opportunity to leave it to their kids and their kids either be able to rent it out or sell it. And that's where I stand. I know I've said enough right now. I'll yield to anyone else. Thanks, Mayor.
Other council that may like to opine on what go ahead, John.
I think if you're asking what the question is, what we're trying to achieve, I think this goes back many years, right? It goes back even last, I think, council, or when we talked about the short-term halt on licenses, I mentioned back to 2007. This was an issue then, right? And it goes back to residents' quality of life. And I think that one thing, and I'll talk about the listening session somewhat, but one of the things I think that came out loud and clear for sure out of that is that short-term rentals are impacting residents' quality of life. And I know some of you've walked away with the opinion that no one wanted caps. That's not, as you read through the verbatim data, that what I got from it. And I think part of the problem with the listening sessions is they were very qualitative. There was no quantitative data in there. More aligned to something you'd see at a corporate retreat in a team building where you talked and things were listed on a flip chart. We were afforded the luxury of having the verbatim comments, and I actually went through them. And you could take away what you wanted from it. The other problem with the listening sessions is we really didn't know who we were listening to, because there's no quantitative distribution of who we were listening to. I don't know if we were listening to people in the real estate or the short-term rental business. I don't know if we were talking to residents. I don't know who we were listening to. But and I'll just read that most important message for council, and these are verbatim comments that were taken, and this is what was in our package. We want any policy put into place to apply to all property equally. Maintain residential character of neighborhoods. Err on the side of residents while realizing our income comes from rentals. Do nothing and check back in 30 years. I think we know where that one came from. all agree that property rights and community livability are important, but divided on how to prioritize. We are divided. Polar opposite views. 1 person had 0 STRs, another had 100% STRs would be okay. And somewhere in between is probably the answer. So I don't know, I did not walk away from the listening session, at least the one I went to, that everybody there was opposed to putting any kind of limitations on the number of STRs we have, and quite the opposite. I think the whole premise here is that we were elected by residents, and through numerous forums, including the strategic exercise that we went through in 2021, the balance between STRs and residents is very important, and as it relates to impacting the quality of life. So I think it's our jobs to listen to the residents. I think it's our job to find a way to that we can balance this. The number's not a third, a third, and a third. You look at this chart right here, it's 37%. If you add in the ones that are active and don't have licenses, we're at 39%. And if you always believe it's going to be a third and a third and a third, and it always has been a third and a third and a third, then no one should be opposed to putting some guide rails in case we're all wrong and that it creeps up. So I think it's our job to put in some solution, some way to balance all the needs, but yet protect the residential neighborhoods and the community. And I think that's our job, and that's what we're really trying to achieve through this thing.
Jan?
I'd just like to say, looking at the chart that you have up there, number one is livability, and I think that's the most important element up there. I agree with Councilman Bogosian that we're not trying to get rid of short-term rentals. Short-term rentals are our lifeblood here. We just want a balance in our community. And the question that we're trying to answer that's very difficult is, what is that balance? And if we let it go too long and get out of balance, then it's going to be much harder to get back to where we want to be. So the questions that we're asking now are tough questions, but they're questions of what do we want in a balanced community? Is it a third permanent residence, a third second homes, and a third short-term rentals? Or is it some other mix than that? Is it 40% short-term rentals, which looks like what we're creeping towards now, 50% short-term rentals, or 75% short-term rentals? So that's what we're doing, is we're starting with what used to be. It's not even there anymore, a third, a third, a third. But where do we want to be? I'm a planner. I'm a city planner. I look long range. I don't want to wait 30 years to find out where we get. I want to help plan to get there so that we don't veer off the path that we want. So please, help us do that. It's not that we don't want short-term rentals. We love short-term rentals. They pay our bills. But there are issues. The one thing I'd like to say with our discussion is that the way I see it should go is that we've got two items that we need to address. It's not either or, it's both and. The first one is absolutely enforce existing ordinances. And just so that the community knows, we are already starting on that. The first thing we tackled was the noise ordinance, and we've been working on that already, trying to tighten it up so that we have more specific criteria for determining when there's a noise problem, quantifying it so we can tell the community when there is a noise issue that we can address, and then having stricter enforcement so that if it is a problem, we can correct it, we can get it corrected. We want to do that with all of the other issues that we found out from the listening sessions as well, that we're all aware of actually along the way. That needs to be done now regardless of what we decide to do with caps. They're two separate issues. They're both parallel. They're both related. The second one is with what the short-term rental cap, whether we're going to have a cap, what it should be, How we're going to deal with short-term rentals, the number of short-term rentals we can live with is another bigger issue, I think, that's going to be harder for us to solve. But we're already starting on the ordinances and starting to tighten them up. We'll be having more and more meetings, separate meetings, I think, from this. I'm not sure exactly because it wasn't in our agenda today. But for garbage collection, for parking is an issue, noise ordinance, like I said. We've already tightened up some of the issues in terms of rental management and oversight and those kind of things. Those are all issues we are going to address. So don't think it's an either-or kind of situation with this. Thanks.
Scott?
Yeah, I'd like to add maybe two things to our list of things we're trying to solve, and I've heard it throughout the commentary tonight. One is, how do we define and maintain a balance? We keep talking about it, whether it's a third, a third, a third. I don't think we know what that is, and we continue to have different definitions about it, and if that's gonna be one of the things we can resolve here. I do believe we're tipping, I believe we've tipped, and we are heading towards 40% or higher on one of the slices of our pie. But we need to clearly define that pie. We need to make sure it always adds up to 100%, and we need to account for it. The second thing is we've demonstrated, since we've got 50 or so rogue, I don't know what you want to call them, operators without a license, that demonstrates to me that number should be 2 or 3. We should never have 50 unlicensed properties on the island. We're not keeping track of them. We're not enforcing it. And I believe what is our penalty for non-license? A $500 fine? Is that what it is? Okay. There's incentive not to license, in my opinion. So we need to add another bullet up there that talks about how do we track and manage this inventory. Thank you.
Katie?
Yeah, I'd like to agree with the primary need of enforcement. I definitely think that's the first thing that we need to do. And I know that we are working on the noise ordinance, and I think that'll help. I think that we should look to hire somebody that can take some of the load off of Desiree and Douglas, and that we can get somebody that could keep a tighter check on this and the enforcement. The other thing, one of the things I took away from the listening sessions was that since we started licensing these, I believe there's only been one property that's lost its license. I think that if we were to even think about putting a cap, we need to have a serious penalty enforcement situation where if you violate the ordinances that exist a certain amount of times in a year or whatever, you lose your license. And then the plus to that is that license goes back into the pool of available licenses. So that would be one really simple way of fixing. I believe that would probably fix the noise, the ordinance violation issue. The other thing is I have heard very consistently from people who are against caps that they don't want things to change. They don't want this island to change. They like it the way that it is. And that's great. And it has been for 30 years fairly consistently a third, a third, a third. Unfortunately, in 2021 or 2, within the last couple of years, Mount Pleasant put a cap on short-term rentals. And it's full. Go to the website. You can't get one today. I have a rental property in Mount Pleasant that I've thought about short-term renting. I can't. So if you're going to look for an investment property for short-term rentals, Mount Pleasant's out of the picture. Folly Beach is about to be out of the picture. Sullivan's has always been, well, not always, but for a long time, Sullivan's has been, so that's kind of a non-issue. So the idea that it's been great here and we like it the way that it is changing. The world around us is changing, and we have to be aware of that, and that has to come into the discussion. I'm not exactly sure at this point how that does come into the discussion, but that is something that we all need to look at. We do not live in an isolated bubble. We live in the middle of a very thriving metropolitan community that includes multiple beach communities. And pretty soon, we'll be the only one without a cap. So,
Thank you. Yeah. Let's, Kevin, go ahead, Kevin.
Quality of life. Personally, I think keeping taxes low on this island is a huge quality of life. And because of the 6%ers and the short-term rentals, our taxes are probably some of the lowest in the state. If there are violations with livability or quality of life, then we need to enforce it. I think that's been pretty much said over and over and over again in our forums. I think this is all about property rights, which I support property rights, will continue to support property rights. And picking winner or losers, I believe, will affect property rights. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. John?
Can I just say something to that property rights issue? I know we're kind of getting off track here. But I don't see this as a property rights. Because I don't know where your property rights begin and mine end, and vice versa. Because if you're renting and have a business, a short-term rental next to me that's violating to enjoy my home or my quality of life, then you're violating my property rights. So it's a slippery slope to say property rights, and I think it's been shown even across. Look, we're not plowing new ground here. This is. You look across the nation, and there's just one example after another of municipalities that are enacting short-term rental restrictions, not only in South Carolina along the beach, this is all over the country. And I think it's been challenged numerous times and defeated numerous times as this is a property rights issue. It's more of a zoning issue to me. And I just wanted to, I know that's an issue that we've heard numerous times, property rights, but I personally don't see it like that. Others may feel differently, but I just don't see that as a property rights issue, just for the reasons I stated.
Thank you. So let's move, oh, I'm sorry, Jimmy.
Just have a couple of small things to say. To keep talking about enforcement, and I agree with that. If you did the simple math, let's say the short-term rental licenses were $1,600 today. I know they're higher than that. The minimum short-term rental license annually is $350. That's over $500,000 alone there in revenue coming into the city. And it seems like if it's an enforcement issue, which I agree with, that we could step up enforcement by hiring new personnel, hiring software to track the data. And in fact, the short-term rental licenses would pay for the program to increase the enforcement issues. A couple years ago, I kept hearing from some people on the island saying, you have too many meetings. You have too many meetings. We have too many meetings. So I'm wondering, how many meetings do we have scheduled on this issue? Is this going on for?
Just two right now.
Just two right now. So I'd just like to clearly define what we're trying to accomplish that hasn't already been done. Do you want to have more listening sessions? If you don't like the answers, will we just circle back and do this all over again? Or when are we going to have the questions that you want, the people that are for the caps, have your questions in a decisive manner answered? Because it sounds like to me we're just running in a big circle right now. And I'm all about better enforcement. And please think about that revenue number. That's a big number. And one final point, I live in a little small house on the island, a little J.C. Long house. Been there since 1986 and never lived anywhere else. And my property taxes are $1,138 this year. And I'm grateful for that. Of that, approximately 20%, a little more than 20%, goes to the city of Isle of Palms. That's about $288 that I get police and fire protection, a great rec center, a marina that's been paid for by tourists for the most part, and rental revenues from the tenants down there, and garbage pickup. It's a very well-run city, in my opinion. for that amount of money. I don't have a short-term rental license. I don't expect to get one. But if I did decide to get one, if I got one now, that $228, my property tax, and what I call tax is when the government's taking money out of your pocket. So I'd have to be forced to buy a short-term rental license, $350. April 30th, it expires. I'd have to buy another one. So instead of my property taxes or the money that the city of Isle of Palm gets from me to protect my property rights, instead of it being $288, it will be almost $1,000. Thank you.
There's a period at the end of that.
Yep.
Got it. So let's do this. I want to at least get to some of the conversation about data tonight and make sure we do have common denominators at least before we get too far down the road. But, you know, this is a multifaceted piece. I mean, we had listening sessions, 140-plus people. Some were residents, some were second homeowners, some were rental owners, some were, it's important to everybody. We need to listen to all the pieces, you know, that go into this spice mix from all these constituents and make sure, I get the math that residents elect us. I get that. But this is an important issue to a whole lot of people, people that have invested their business lives on this island that we need to make sure have a voice in the game somewhere. And John, to your point, you know, we started this strategic plan survey in 2020. 600-plus folks responded, about 15%, really high number, which is great. Another 1,300 had requested the survey but didn't necessarily respond. So there's pretty wide acknowledgement that the survey was out there, that it was important, and we got a lot of feedback from it. You know, what we heard from that was residents were most satisfied with the quality of fire, police, and waste collection services. Jimmy, to your comment, in some respects. The three areas for improvement from that survey were maintenance of streets and sidewalks, traffic flow within the city limits, and management of stormwater runoff. Those are the three top items that our residents said that's what they wanted us to focus on. The top 5 strategic issues from that same survey, and this is on a 5-point scale: managing pressure from population growth in surrounding metro areas. You're seeing some of this language because it's on all of our agendas. It's in our strategic plan document that's online, and this is what drove a lot of our actions over the last few years. The need for improved infrastructure, drainage, sewer, and power. Financial sustainability, again, Jimmy, to your comment, in some respects. Balance of rental investment properties and primary home ownership, and expansion of environmental protection efforts. So just a quick.
Before you go on, Mr. Mayor, I think that balance of rental investment properties and primary homeownership, that is where we've got to focus, and that's where we've got to, what we've got to define. We have not,
Totally agree.
we have not defined that.
Completely agree with that.
And it's interesting. I encourage anyone, it's out on the web, or the city website, you can look at the details around that survey. And it even breaks out the findings by the participants. In other words, residents, where they were in that spectrum, where full part-time residents were, where rental owners were, and where business owners were. And it's pretty telling, so I encourage you to look at it.
We've already heard this touched on tonight, the listening sessions that we had in 2022, 3 sessions at the rec center, about 140 folks. Those of you that participated, familiar with the setup. We heard start with enforcement of existing regulations, focus on quality of life and livability. No strong support for caps or zones based on the feedback. So let's shift gears a little bit and start talking about some data, because I do want to get to at least this page that was handed out tonight that council you have in front of you, and residents was on the back table if you didn't get a copy. So Douglas or Desiree, you're going to start with kind of what we have and start getting some baselines.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mayor. I'll just go quickly through these bullet points, and I think each of these items has its own slide, so we'll spend a little more time on each of them as we hit that slide. But we already have a fair amount of information. There are certain things that are working on. We're actively working on those. And we also, you know, we're hoping as a staff to get some feedback from you all through this meeting or the next meeting on what you all think that we could also use. So that's just kind of have that in the back of your mind is if you think of things that would be helpful, please let us know and we'll work to get those. We have a pretty extensive set of city license data sets. I would say that, and I would, I guess, couch it by saying that many of the years, we have data going back 15 years, 20 years, but many of those years have some issue with them. There was a time when we were rolling long-term rentals. We didn't distinguish between them. There was also times when we had what we think were artificial bumps in the licensing because of discussions at council. We had a myriad of things happen. So we have that data. You have to kind of look at footnotes to fully digest that it's not really perfect.
But Douglas, I think we've really got to disclose that presentation that was made at the listening session, that graph that was presented without the footnotes is very important. Because if I were at that listening session, I would have walked away saying, there's no problem here. What's the problem? I understand that completely. The footnotes basically said that data was all apples and oranges and that we had missing data, it was estimated, it was long-term and short-term rentals at the beginning, it was not short-term or not long-term rentals at the end. Those footnotes and not presenting them, I think we did a very big disservice to the community. And I think it was a little bit misleading, to say the least. That's just my opinion. And I think in the future, if we're going to present any data, we need to be very transparent on what that data says and how we compiled it. And I hope we don't ever do that again.
Well,
I think we need to just present data that we know we can verify as being a good picture. So I think that's the problem, is putting out data just to be putting it out.
It's got to be presented accurately. It's got to be presented with all the caveats. Even tonight, we're going to be presenting data that has notes in the file that made this was called manipulated 2010, 2015, 2020, 2022. And we're not going to be sharing tonight, I believe, all the notes of what went into that data. But let's go ahead and present it. I just want to make sure that the public knows that there's more than meets the eye on this particular schedule.
Well, how do you suggest you fix it?
I suggest we don't present data until it's vetted.
Vetted by who? We have a data security officer or something?
No, Jimmy, it's clear that we've got to make sure that we are consistent. There are numbers being presented here tonight that if you look at the denominator, there are 5 different versions of it floating around in our documents. Is
So
that
what are we gonna look
acceptable?
at
Would
it?
you do that on a tax return?
What are we going to look at it?
I have a suggestion, and that is, I've worked with a lot of municipalities as a city planner, and I've worked with very large cities and very small towns as well. And what I've found in all of them is that you have a staff in-house that does the day-to-day operations, but they would hire expert consultants like me to come in to do the bigger jobs. So we are not disadvantaged by being a small town because we have the opportunity to use the same consultants to help us with our decisions as well. And the first thing I'd recommend is hiring what is called an AICP, an American Institute of Certified Planning Consultant, to come in and help us with this. They work throughout the Southeast. They will know what other cities and towns have done in this situation. They're used to working with this kind of data so they can read it and interpret it for us and present it properly. And they can give us the guidance that we need so that we can make informed decisions. I shared a short list with Desiree and our mayor, 4 firms that were just recommended. It's not the only ones, but they all have city planners and urban designers on staff who could help us with this. So that's my suggestion. If we don't like the data we're looking at, we don't have anyone like that on staff. We can hire someone like that to help us.
Yeah, we're not trying to get the solution right here. I think let's let Douglas walk through what we have and multiple comments tonight. You can make the data say whatever you want it to say. Whether you don't like the answer or not is a whole nother issue. And if you want to control the narrative, all we're trying to do, and when we get to this page tonight, I want to make sure at a minimum we can get to a spot that says, I agree that those are the right dwelling units, because that number drives everything else. And there's, I hate this third conversation because there's numbers underneath each of those that draw you to get to a different conclusion. And we'll talk about some of those when we get to this number, like the Palms Hotel, like the Seaside Inn, we're never going to change those numbers from a short-term rental building community. So do they even need to be in the number? I mean, that's just the way you can manipulate numbers and data in any way, shape, or form you want to. But let's just give our staff the courtesy of the respect to walk through what they've spent hours upon hours working on and listen to what they have to say. And if we still feel like we need some more data, then let's go grab it. Douglas?
Yeah, and I would just say to Councilman Pierce's point, we intentionally didn't put that graph because we know that, there's a reaction to the footnotes. But we have said since the beginning that we put those footnotes there for a reason. They were there throughout the Planning Commission's review. They were there. I feel fairly confident in when the Planning Commission represented that to you. Why it didn't make it into the listening session, I mean, I don't think it was, I know it wasn't an intentional thing. I think it was kind of a point in time. So we're happy to do, if you all want to wipe that data clean and not look at it, we can do that. But it is the best numbers that we have with all the warts and all. So we'll leave that decision to you all, how to handle that. We're also going to cover, and we have information on what the surrounding communities are doing currently. We've talked a little bit about the enforcement and monitoring software. We have that in place. We've had it in place for probably 4 or 5 years. So they provide some good information, and we can go through. Again, there are some strengths to that. There are also weaknesses in it, and we'll talk about those. You all have the Planning Commission's recommendations. Those, as the mayor has mentioned, you all have. They spent a lot of time, effort on that, and you all, as a group, I don't know if you fully kind of vetted it and discussed it and digested it. So we have that information. Mayor's mentioned the listening session feedback, and then finally, kind of really a newer tool is that we have in-house is Matt Sims, the city zoning administrator, has created maps, created a familiarity with the graphic information mapping software that is not only good for seeing where the rentals are, but it can also be a good tool for doing the analysis of, and that was part of what the Planning Commission at the end, when they had different zones, a tool like this is useful to be able to see where they're going, and from an area perspective, that would be a useful tool. So next slide, Desiree is going to go over the analysis from the county and the city's licensing software.
And this is a slide that's at the back of the room, so you won't have to try and focus on the screen. You can have it in
Yes,
front of you. Sorry, Desiree.
we realize that this might be too small for people to look at from the screen, so we made copies. Hopefully everybody had a chance to get one. It's also in the packet. So the source of the data that you see as part of this analysis is property tax records that we receive from the county. That's the best source of data that we have. We have them for many years. We used 2022 to create the analysis that you have in front of you. When we talk about short-term rental licenses, that is the city's licensing software. Our building department monitor and issue licenses. So that's the number that we're getting for 2022 issued licenses. So I'll break it down for you all. When we look at the county data, we did adjust the county data. It was not manipulated. It was adjusted to, and we're being very transparent in this presentation that shows what was included to the county data. There was new construction that was not listed in the county list for 2022. We do know and have verified that those are shown as vacant lots in the county list. We do know that there are properties there now with short-term rental licenses, so that's the first addition that you have on the data. The county data also includes just one parcel ID for duplexes and triplexes, so we've verified those and adjusted those numbers to include an account for those that only show as one parcel ID in the county list, but we know that there are multiple units within those, so that was the other addition. And then the third addition to the county list is the units associated with the Palms Hotel. The Palms Hotel was listed as one. We added 68 to account for the different units within that parcel. This data is public. Happy to share that with anybody who's interested so that you can run a similar analysis. When you look at the distribution between 4 and 6% for 2022, plus the addition, we get to a total number of dwelling units of 4,569. That's for 2022 on Isle of Palms. That's just residential dwelling units. Does not include commercial parcels.
Excuse me, wait a minute.
That does include each room at the Palms Hotel?
It does.
Okay.
That's the 68
That's
number.
that add-on.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And it also includes 51 units from the Seaside Inn.
Right.
And it also includes vacant lots?
It does not.
Okay.
Total dwelling units on the island.
So you said it does not include commercial. You mean commercial retail-type properties?
Correct. Commercial
not-
parcels.
Not commercial condos that are on our list.
That's correct. Those are included.
Commercial condos are residential.
That's correct.
Anywhere that you could sleep.
Anywhere you could sleep,
Don't go
that
that
it's
far.
not a hotel room.
Crazy.
Yeah, right here.
Anywhere you'd want to sleep.
So hotel rooms are not included in this
Right.
list.
Okay.
The
Yeah,
reason
so
that
hotel
this,
rooms, not.
the reason
Anything
that
that's
the
got a
Seas,
short-term rental.
that's correct. Seaside Inn and the Palms Hotel, you could argue behave like a hotel, but they have a short-term rental license with the city. They're individually owned. So they are included in our calculation of total dwelling units.
And that's a relatively new change for Palms, at least, I think. I mean,
Correct. It used to be the Holiday Inn.
back in the day. So to that comment, and now that those adjustments have been explained, this 4,569 total dwelling units, and I hate to get so granular, but this is pretty critical, and this is the number that drives everything else. I mean, is there a head nod around the table here that says that number seems reasonable, that number's still off, we got work to do still on that number?
We can agree to it at this point, I guess.
Scott?
Yeah, I'm just, and this is for maybe a takeaway, but how does that, we just presented, 4 days ago, 4885 in another presentation.
That was the census number, and I don't disagree. I think we need to figure out what number we're using. I think the reason we're using county data now is we believe that's the most accurate source of
Yeah,
information.
what was the other presentation? I'm not familiar with
I think
it.
the accomplishments report.
And then there was
Got it.
a prior version that said 4419.
Well,
I mean, and that's why I'm saying, we got to get to, this is where the definition comes in and is critical. So
and
if,
that's why we're walking through this, and you see the adjustments. To me, the county data is the absolute spot of accuracy.
I have a question.
Maybe we just agree that from moving forward, that
This is the number.
This is where we start. Like, this document that we're looking at is where, as far as we know today, this is accurate. and-
Clean as
and
we can
we're
get it.
Happy with it.
Yeah.
And that's a good, solid number
Hey, it's
that
a
we can
start.
agree with.
Yeah, and
No?
I agree. I don't have a problem with that. But I just have a question around previous years, because when I was looking behind the data here, it seemed that 2020, 2015, 2010 had the same dwelling unit, exact number, 4,569, as using in the denominator to be able to calculate those percentages. So I just found it odd that going back 12 years, we still had the exact same number of dwelling units.
I can't follow that because I know that the county's list, the issue with vacant lots being showed as vacant, but having a house, that shows up year after year.
I'm just saying on the spreadsheet that you sent that showed how these numbers were calculated on the pivot table and the add back of 129 units for the things that we talked about, the Palms Hotel and the triplex duplex, it equaled the 4,569.
But that data
But-
wasn't for prior years. I think that table was just for the 2022 number.
No, it went back to calculate these percentages in this distribution of 4%,
Oh, on the left, I
6%
got it.
dwellings on time, 2010, 2015, 2020. I would like to go back and understand that at least.
Sure, we can-
As a follow-up, because it just made no sense to me whatsoever to calculate the percentages as the denominator was the exact same number as 22. I can live with the 22 being 4569. I just find it very strange that all the previous years were also 4569. So
Yeah,
we don't have to solve it here, but I would like to go back.
Yeah,
Well, and
that doesn't make, I agree, and we'll go back and to look at 2010. We didn't run this analysis for those previous years, just for 2022. And that number of 4569 comes with the additions that we did that I just spelled out. We haven't done that for the other years.
Well, and
But we
place-
are planning on doing
Yeah, a
it.
place we might want to look at that, our published comprehensive plan, if we're going to go back, and if we even go back to 2000, has dwelling units of 3881 in 2000 and 4274 in 2010. So I think to John's point, that will impact what the percentage is calculating and the trend. So I think we should nail down those previous numbers as best we can.
For prior years. Yeah.
Correct,
for
yes, I've
prior-
made a note
yes.
of that.
Yes.
If the concern here is residential communities and quality of life, I would suggest that we look at excluding from these numbers condominiums and commercial condos at a very minimum. The vast majority of the condominiums in Wild Dunes were built specifically as short-term rentals.
Yeah.
The sea cabins were all built specifically for short-term rentals. And if our concern is residential quality and residential communities, those numbers should be excluded, and that skews all the other numbers.
And I don't disagree. Can we put a pin in that? Because I think that is exactly the heart.
Put a pin in it.
Or nitpick, you know.
But we need
Hang
a
on,
total.
Jan.
Makes sense.
We need a
Hang
total as
on.
well. All right.
So I think, because I think that is exactly where you can take this data in multiple ways, and I would completely, at a minimum, you take out the 119, which is Sea Cabins and Palms Hotel. I would argue you take out the 598 that are 6% with an IOP short-term rental. But again, those are conversations that we need to have around making sure we are agreeing on the data and whether it's historical, current, future, whatever. So I'm hearing 4,569 for current 2022 data. And again, I know this is granular and crazy conversation you may think your council's having, but it's just there's so many sources of data and there's so many pieces to it that it's just that's the critical number that we need to get to.
Can I ask
So
one
I
other
I
question?
do think,
Can I-
I just do think I think we're actually getting to something very important here. And that is that if we can get, as a starting point, if we can all be looking at the same numbers and agree to the numbers that we're looking at, I think that would be a hugely beneficial thing for our
Totally
future conversations. So it does sound weird that we're talking about
No, I'm with you.
these teeny little numbers.
On a duplex and a triplex, if it says the duplex, do we issue 2 short-term rental licenses for that?
We do.
duplex?
We
We do,
Okay.
yes.
We do.
If each individual unit has an application and.
Yeah.
So-
Assuming they want to rent both units, you
That's
issue
right.
2
They would
separate
each have
units.
one.
Yeah.
So Desiree, I hate to cut you off, but to do this, let's cut you off.
Oh.
And we'll pick the rest of this conversation up. at
So
our-
Mayor, just to clarify it real quickly if I can, did we agree on 4,569?
We did.
I think we did.
Yeah.
Current
Okay.
year 2022 data
All
is
right.
4,569.
That's total.
Total dwelling
Dwelling
units.
And if we've got
That's
all
our
the
starting
backup on
point.
that.
As a
that's-
starting point.
Victory, 1. All right, there being no further business.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?